LEGO has released 155 CCBS sets, 72 of which are from Hero Factory, meaning that when I made this video I was only looking at half of the CCBS catalog. So I guess now I'll remedy that, looking at the top 10 worst non-Hero Factory CCBS sets. If you haven't seen my worst Hero Factory sets video, I'll be using the same rules in this as I used there. Rule 1 is that I am not taking into account the parts that come with these sets, because you can only get them secondhand anyway. So if you're in the market for parts, why not just buy the parts you need instead of the whole set? Rule 2 is that I'm going to try to remain as objective as I can. For example, I think Gully Uniter's mask looks awful, but that doesn't make the entire figure bad. And finally, I'd like to clarify that I'm only looking at pure CCBS sets. So system sets that use CCBS are not being considered for this list at all. So with all that out of the way, let's start with number 10. Originally, I was just going to put all of the human Star Wars CCBS figures because they all look pretty bad, but Luke kind of stands out as particularly worse. I mean, personally, I think he has the worst face out of all of these figures, but that's not why I think he's worse than the rest of the human figures. All of the other human characters at the very least have some sort of play feature, or just a way more interesting build. Meanwhile, Luke is just a very basic CCBS set that gets handcuffs. And while I could make these same arguments for Obi-Wan, his head looks pretty close to how he looked in Clone Wars, so he gets a pass. And here we have our only Chima entry, Chi Eris. And while I don't think this is a particularly bad figure, Eris makes the cut for looking absolutely nothing like her minifigure counterpart. And I feel like the issues primarily come down to the head. As you can see here, Chima Eagles have a more soft round shape, but what LEGO gave us in this CCBS set, we get a very blocky design that's pretty much unrecognizable as the same character, with some very soulless eyes to boot. Another, admittedly less significant issue is that all the Eagle figures are supposed to have yellow hands, but for the CCBS one, LEGO, I guess, forgot. So, at first glance, Darth Maul is a pretty cool looking figure with a very cool action feature, so you might be scratching your head as to why he makes the list. Well, that action feature actually is a problem. The way the arms are constructed for this figure basically give him no elbows. I think maybe if you were to stick a ball joint and CCBS bone right here, you could give him elbows and still retain the action feature, but I'm not at home right now, I don't have access to my parts, so I can't confirm that. But all of that's kind of irrelevant to the fact that LEGO released a $30 action figure without posable elbows, and I personally just think that's unacceptable. And it sucks because I do actually like this set. Captain America has one of the most simple yet effective designs for a superhero. So when LEGO decided to make a Captain America construction figure, why did they put massive silver shoulders on him? And I mean, it probably wouldn't look as bad if these pieces were blue, but no, they're silver and gunmetal, and to my knowledge, I don't remember Captain America just having big silver shoulder pads at any point. But also, on the finished figure, there are these open ball joints, and it doesn't have any upper arm armor, making it just look very unfinished. And this is just a side note, but I found this bootleg Captain America that, head aside, actually looks pretty good. I want to know where I can buy these. While the Toa Masters are overall some pretty good sets, Bohatu is the exception. The main issue with this set is that every positive it has is replicated in all of the other Toa Masters. I mean, you can put his weapons on his feet, but you can do the same thing with Tahu and Gali. So that's just nothing special. Bohatu feels like he was the first of these Toa designed and LEGO just didn't bother to give him anything to stand out. And to top it off, he's only 66 pieces and sold for the same price as Gali and Liwa, who were 87 and 85 pieces respectively. I mean, even Protector of Stone had more pieces than Pohatu. Now that's just embarrassing. Like Captain America, Joker should have been a very easy slam dunk of a figure, but for some reason LEGO just decided they didn't know what Joker looked like. The first major problem is this torso armor. Why is it just bright green? I thought maybe he'd just be missing his jacket because LEGO just likes giving us Joker figures without jackets, but no. They gave him coattails and a collar, so that's just not the case. Just like Captain America, they gave him a bunch of random gunmetal. And personally, I don't really like this gun. I think it's just like way too bright. It's got this weird gap in it, and I don't know, it just doesn't look like a good Joker weapon. I think if LEGO took one of these pieces and put one of these flags on it but bigger, it would have looked much better. The only remotely positive thing I can say about this set is that it's the best way to get purple CCBS parts. I'll be honest, I'm not a very big fan of the 2016 creatures, but Kitar is the only one that I would just say is flat out bad. First off, I find his color scheme to just be way messier than it should be. Having lime green, transparent lime green, silver, regular brown, and burnt orange, and tan. And while I do get that he's supposed to have the same color scheme as Pohatu, Pohatu doesn't have the solid brown on the figure himself, and the colors are way better distributed than on Kitar. The action feature just kind of flops around and moves the entirety of the back, which I just think looks very weird. But the way it's constructed just kind of leaves this horrible gap on the back of the figure, in between its back legs and the tail. I think if LEGO went for a much more simple design, this set would have turned out way better. So I'm just going to ignore how pathetic this thing is as a villain for Bionicle's grand return. And to be extra nice, I will ignore the fact that this spider has 6 legs, and not 8. The simplest way I can describe Lord of Skull Spiders is that it's not really a construction figure, it is a Technic claw with random spider elements just kind of slapped on. And while the action feature does look cool in motion, it comes at the cost of pretty much no leg posability whatsoever. So this thing can only get in one pose and then sit on your shelf. The entire figure is also just incredibly gappy and looks incredibly unfinished. As mentioned earlier, the legs are pretty much not posable, but the only other thing you can really pose on this thing is the jaw, which... okay.
Hey!
Yeah?
What the hell is this?
Where do I even begin with this figure? Well, I guess the first thing I can start with is, why is it lime green? Most of LEGO's other Hulk figures use either the bright green or the olive green, so I'm just kind of baffled as to why they chose lime green for this figure. Especially because LEGO was making the bright green CCBS pieces anyway. As a matter of fact, I have one in bright green, thanks to Ecuadorian knockoffs. But this thing isn't sitting at number 2 just because it's the wrong shade of green. This thing is sitting at number 2 because it is an awful figure. Just like Captain America and Joker, Hulk has just these random large chunks of gunmetal. There are a bunch of open ball joints all over this figure, which just looks so bad. LEGO neglected to give him fingers, so he just has these very weird looking paws. And oh my god, these lower legs are awful. Whose idea was it to use like this one really skinny piece and some shoes for the Hulk's leg? Like, I understand that they didn't want to make new feet, but why is his leg so skinny? The back of the figure is completely open and looks terrible. I would not be surprised if this set was intended to be much bigger but had to be scaled down to be the same price as the other superheroes, because that is honestly what this figure feels like. Before I get into my number 1 slot, I just want to go over a quick dishonorable mentions lightning round. All the rest of these Star Wars human figures, with the exception of Obi-Wan and Poe Dameron, they all just look very uncanny and creepy. Batman. If this set had an actual cape instead of whatever these things on his back are supposed to be, then the set would actually be pretty good. Chi Gorzan, I think the set's just kind of underwhelming. Chi Kragger has a pretty big gap in the torso, and also the limbs are just very skinny. Tahu Master. I just find this set to be very bland and also incredibly overpriced. This is an 89-piece set for $20 compared to Gali and Liwa's 87 and 85 pieces for $15. Skull Basher. The back hangs off way too far and the torso is covered in gaps. Gali Uniter. The mask makes her look dead. Liwa Uniter. These arms are way too small and awkward as hell to pose. Quake Beast and Storm Beast. Have these two together because they're both incredibly gappy figures for the sake of functions that are really not worth it. And without any further ado, the worst CCBS set, you might know it if you frequent the Hero Factory Discord server, it's Skull Scorpio. The first major problem with this set is that the legs don't move, they are completely static. And I thought Lord of Skullspider was bad for not even this egregious of an offense. But don't worry, because in place of functioning legs, this thing has a very awful, oversized tail. Not only is this thing covered in gaps, but the function that this thing provides is just not worth it at all. The tail barely reaches in front of the figure, and there's this barb on the back that stops you from moving the tail forward, otherwise it would just stop the function from working. If I felt like being nice, I would just dismiss this thing as bad, but I don't feel like being nice. This tail looks like it was just taken from some completely unrelated figure and was just slapped onto this poor excuse of a set to justify its existence. As a matter of fact, the official combination model between Skull Grinder and Skull Scorpio just has Skull Grinder using Skull Scorpio's tail as a weapon, because this thing is not a tail. I don't understand why LEGO didn't do something kind of like what I came up with here, because it is both much simpler and actually looks like it belongs to a scorpion. But okay, the tail sucks dick, but you know what? Pincers are also a very defining trait of a scorpion, so this has got to have good pincers, right? Do you have eyes? Not only did LEGO decide to use the Savage Planet claws, which leaves a terrible gap in the pincer, but they also used them in transparent red, which sticks out horribly. With most of the sets on this list, you can at least make an argument that they come with good parts, but this set has a whopping 3 exclusive parts. This mask, and the legs, all of which are not very desirable for mock making in my opinion. But hey, I'm just some Hero Factory zealot that hates Bionicle G2 for killing my favorite toy line, so let's see what actual Bionicle critics think.
Now that I've managed to get through mostly just the objective facts and features of this set, let me tell you what I think about it. I hate it.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we've got a fairly recent addition to the Bionicle line, Skull Scorpio.
Skull Scorpio is easily the worst CCBS set in existence, and in my opinion, one of the worst sets in LEGO construction, period. I genuinely cannot come up with a single good thing about this set. So that's why it cements itself as number 1. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, comment down below if you haven't already subscribed, because I've got some more videos planned. Hero Factory Zeta is taking me a lot longer than I thought because I'm not as good at making that as I thought I would be. But yeah, until then, take care.